Beauty. Well, guys, thanks for being here again. I know it's another Zoom meeting, which is not fun, but hopefully we can get a little break from the Zooms, obviously, because some of you guys are, I don't know, who still has exams? Oh, we'll pray. Dania, did you have one today?
I had a take-home exam that was due today, so submitted it. So now I'm done.
Feeling good about it?
Yeah, feeling pretty good.
Thank you, Jesus. Um, yeah. So I apologize that we're on Zoom. Obviously, that sucks still, but yeah, we're hoping to strategically plan some more of these, and this one's kind of combined with like our whatever last thing of the year as far as like weekly program stuff. But um yeah, we hope to do more of these. And I mean, you guys know this already, but the heart and vision for these is just to have a space where you guys can be poured into from legends and amazing people that have gone before us, like Rihanna. So yeah, that's what these are for. And so we're pumped. Danielle and Jock have been just in the cookbook of planning these over the next season, and so they'll be good. But we wanted to sneak one in before the end of the year. But anyways, without further ado, Daniel, take the floor. It's all yours. Pastor Danielle.
Hi guys. At first it sounded like you said Dania, and I'm like, yeah, Dania, take the floor. She would have been like, what do you mean? Also would have been great. But yeah, we were just chatting, us girls, when we had our girls group. We were just chatting about how we would love the opportunity to learn more. And I know that in the past, I think there were more leaders meetings where there was a bit more teaching and just like ways to help support each other. And so we just wanted to bring that back. And so we thought that we would start with a topic like anxiety, especially right now with everything being online and our students, they're all back online with school and the holidays and back in quarantine. We just thought it'd be a really great place to start to be able to understand a bit more of, maybe where teens are at and be able to help support them a little bit better. Obviously, we're not therapists, but the more that we can learn, the more that we can be aware and just be able to understand where our teens might be at and questions that we could ask. And so I couldn't think of anyone better to ask my friend Rihanna. I was thinking today, everyone should have a friend who's also a therapist because it's very nice. But she's honestly one of like the wisest people I know. And I always end up asking her questions, and she always has great things to say. And so I'm just excited that she gets to share some of that with you guys. And you may have seen her on Tehillah. She was on one of the panels, and yeah, she's just super knowledgeable. So I'm super excited that she's teaching. And so, yeah, I'm excited to hear what she says. Grab your notebooks and take notes, but I think it's going to be really good.
Thanks, Danielle. And Jer, I've never been called a legend before, so thank you for that. Yes, I'm grateful to be here and to be asked to talk about anxiety and depression. I, for a second, thought, what am I going to talk about? And then realized that I'm literally working with people facing anxiety and depression every day. So a moment to kind of laugh at myself. So hopefully you have the handout that I sent to Danielle and Jer. I won't be like following it word for word or anything by any stretch. It's just some helpful kind of information. Hopefully you'll have questions. I'll leave room for that at the end. I do want to hear kind of, I'm sure there's specific situations that you're all facing and in different ways, and I'd love to have time to kind of answer some of those specific questions at the end, or if you have questions about anything I have to say, I'm happy to answer those. Like Danielle said, take notes, write down questions, and here we go. So I tried to incorporate a bit about anxiety and depression, just because in both of them being kind of mental health struggles that lots of people are facing now, I figured both would be helpful to chat about. And there's lots of overlapping information with them as well. So you'll see kind of in that handout, there's the psychosocial spiritual model. So all I really wanted to say about that is that, anytime we're talking about health, mental health in particular, there's just this holistic nature to it. So lots of people will point to like the chemical imbalances behind depression and anxiety, and that is the case for some people, but it's rarely like the only reason for depression and anxiety. So if you can view it more in kind of this reference, with this reference in mind, I think you'll find it's easier to address those things with your teens as well, taking into consideration that there's biological characteristics like genes and history and background. So kind of brings up the question if anxiety and depression is present with any of their family members. Not a bad question to ask or information to find out when working with teens. And then behavioral factors, so lifestyle, stress, those sorts of things, as well as the relationships they have, kind of community. And then spiritual, I think it's great that you guys are in the context that you get to like actually have freedom to talk about that, as I don't always in the work that I do. And the benefit of that is it's not just like relationship with God, but God has created us to be in community with people, to be interconnected. And when you have those shared values and some of that, even just being in the same church and getting to be taught together and learn together and do life together, there's a benefit in that. And so, just keeping all of these factors in mind when looking at the teens and the different experiences they're having. Danielle specifically asked me to kind of chat a little bit about signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety. And so I just wanted to clarify before kind of going through these things that you'll see in that handout in front of you, that not everyone who displays these has anxiety and depression. So as you're looking at these things, I don't, want you to go around diagnosing people. Not that I think you would do that. But kind of, if you see these things, see it as an opportunity to ask further questions and be curious with your teens, opposed to kind of just jumping to conclusions and telling them that they have anxiety or depression. So the first being kind of this hopeless outlook. And so some of the things that will kind of help you notice this is if they're asking questions like, why me? Or focusing a lot on the negative, kind of just like telling you all the things that are going wrong in their life without the ability to look towards kind of the positive or have like more of a neutral or grounded perspective on those things. Some of it too is like inappropriate guilt. So I'll talk a little more about this in a bit. But oftentimes there's what are called cognitive distortions that kind of come into play with anxiety. And one of those cognitive distortions is should statements. So if you hear your youth use the word should, it often actually is placing guilt upon themselves. And so that could be a sign of that kind of inappropriate guilt. Like I should have done better on that assignment. I should have studied harder. I shouldn't have spent so much time playing video games. I, should have done X, Y, and Z. That alone is like, it's not innately negative. I think we all do that to some extent. But if that's kind of like, you're just like noticing that's like this continuous kind of conversation or dialogue they're having with themselves, it could be a sign of that hopeless outlook. So the second being loss of interest or pleasure in most activities. I think that's pretty straightforward. If you know kind of what they like, what their hobbies are, and you find out like, I don't know, they haven't read a book in the past 5 months, and that's something they're usually doing all the time. or they're like a pretty social person and they haven't been talking to any of their friends, just things like that. Often more connected to depression than anxiety, but it could be either or both. And then depression and anxiety, usually there's an effect on sleep. So that's something I like to ask most people, just asking if they're sleeping, how well they're sleeping, if it's a restless sleep, if they're waking up like multiple times in the night, or alternatively, if they're kind of sleeping the day away. Neither is really great. Usually restless sleep is for anxiety, sleeping too much, depression, or insomnia can be a part of depression as well. Anytime our basic needs are being unmet, it just puts us towards greater risk of depression and anxiety. Things like sleep, exercise, eating, those sorts of things. And then you might notice like some nervousness or restlessness or just being tense, kind of just paying attention to see if some of the youth are more on edge than they typically would be. I think you would have probably a good gauge for that in kind of your experience with them. Feelings of dread, you might have to inquire about that. Again, kind of connecting to the hopelessness, but kind of looking forward into the future and not really seeing things getting better. And then, yeah, trouble focusing, thinking clearly. Yeah, you'll see, I'll kind of just skip over them. Some of them are really straightforward. And then again, the eating one has to do with basic needs. So whether that's overeating or losing weight, again, not to fixate on that specifically and go around asking everyone if they're depressed if you notice a change in their weight. But more so just if you know that that person's like not intentionally trying to lose weight and they just are looking less and less healthy, it could be one of the things that you pay attention to. Yeah, physical problems, so aches, pains. So this would be kind of like more unexplained things, like randomly someone's getting a headache like every time they're at youth group. That could be anxiety. Or, you know, they have a stomach ache every time they're at youth group. Again, could be anxiety. I think the suicidal thoughts and stuff can sometimes really throw people off, especially youth leaders. It is a tricky one to navigate. And so with that, I would say, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. You're not going to trigger someone by asking questions. Chances are, if they're thinking about it, they've thought about it a lot, and you ask further questions is not going to like push them to make further decisions that they haven't already thought of. And the benefit of asking questions around it is that you can kind of find out, you know, if it's been a fleeting thought, if they've made some sort of plan, if they've tried it before, the severity or seriousness of it, increases if, so for example, if I'm chatting with someone about suicidal ideation is what it's called, so just thinking about suicide, I'll ask, if they have a plan, and with that, like, have they thought of a way? Do they have a time frame? Like, and I'm not anticipating that you have to get into all those questions, but that just lets you know how serious they could be. And so if they have a plan, they have a date, and they've all these things lined up, that's like a pretty serious risk and kind of an opportunity to call someone or reach out to a therapist or call like a mental health service. I think I have one of those things twice, so I'll skip over that if you notice repetition. And so the reason I included the CBT triangle, so it's cognitive behavioral therapy, is because I think in understanding how it works, you can better understand your own maybe anxiety, but also other people's that you encounter. So I won't explain it too much. I just use this model a lot in therapy. It's just that, again, kind of like thoughts and emotions and behaviors are connected. So often all I explain with people is that we have emotions and we can't change our emotions, but we can actually influence them by taking steps around action and behavior or around our thought patterns. Um, and so, yeah, I think even with just like a little bit of an understanding with this, it can prompt some like good questions with your youth. And if you have more questions about this, I can definitely explain it better kind of towards the end if you have questions. But this would be like, so again, yeah, connection of thoughts, emotion, behavior. And when you change or influence the other. And then cognitive distortion. So that's what I mentioned about should statements. So there are 10 cognitive distortions. Most of us experience a few of them, whether you have a large amount of anxiety or not. Anxiety is not innately bad. It actually lets us know that something's going on that we can pay attention to. It's just it becomes kind of out of hand when we're always anxious. You know, like if you're a little anxious before a test, it could prompt you to study. That sort of anxiety is not bad. So there's a couple cognitive distortions listed. Essentially, when there's like anxious thought patterns, it kind of reinforces that anxious feeling, which is why it can be helpful to know what sort of cognitive distortions that you might have or your teens might have, so that you can kind of like chat with them through it, and that will kind of influence the feelings that they have. But yeah, you don't need to have a thorough understanding of that. But I do have an example that might be helpful to kind of envision how it works. So for example, you wake up feeling tired, groggy, and insecure. You have a massive presentation and you hate speaking in front of groups. So your thoughts start coming up. I'm going to mess up. No one's going to like my presentation. I can't even talk in front of a group. How am I going to achieve anything? I'm worthless. I'm a loser. I should just stay home so I don't make a fool out of myself. So those sorts of thoughts, well, are the thought component. So those would make up some of those cognitive distortions, and can be an example of the internal dialogue that we can sometimes have with ourselves. And then enter our feelings. So after a morning filled with your internal thoughts, you're feeling even worse. You feel extremely anxious about your presentation, kind of have this sense of impending doom, like nothing's going to go right. Overall, you're feeling bad, and the last thing you want to do is present. So if we were to take a step back, is it any surprise that our thoughts, if they were that, would influence how we feel? It's because the things we tell ourselves really matter. And that wouldn't just be obviously for your youth, but all of us just generally. Now comes the behavior. So after you go back and forth procrastinating, you make it out the door and you're just starting your presentation. As you begin, your thoughts are running and you're feeling as anxious as ever, even though you know the presentation really well. You can't seem to say what you want to. You barely scrape through your presentation, stumbling on your words and failing to connect the points. How many times have we done this? Gotten ourselves like so worked up that we can barely make it through something that we've done before, we're good at, we know the material, and yet then this puts a dent in your confidence and kind of justifies those negative thoughts you had. Like, yeah, I guess I am a failure. Couldn't even get the words out that I wanted to, and I felt anxious the whole time. And then the next time you go to do a presentation, it's probably even more challenging because all of those thoughts are coming back, and now you have this event that reinforces the belief that you can't do presentations. So with this, even kind of if you pause at the morning part, the thoughts are coming in. If you pause to respond to those things, or even just recognize, okay, these are anxious thought patterns. I've actually done this before. and start to say the positives well, you might still have a little bit of anxiety, but you're less likely to be overrun by it. So I'm sure they're, yeah, saw Danielle smile. And so, yeah, like you're spending time with these teens regularly. I know it looks different in the context of COVID, but you'll probably notice these things. And you know, it could be a fine question to ask. Hey, you know, you seem kind of stressed out, kind of jumping in and out of conversation. What's kind of going on internally? Like, what are your thoughts? What are you telling yourself right now? Now, if you have rapport with these youth, they might answer. Otherwise, that could not go very well. But yeah, it's an opportunity, and I think an opportunity with yourself too, to notice your anxious thoughts. It also just, I think, can provide even more empathy for the teens that you work with when you acknowledge your own kind of anxiety. Yeah, so how do you then support them? Yeah, I think, and I imagine you guys already do this. So if this is kind of just like things you already know, take it as, I guess, a good reminder. I think the first would be just show that you care. You know, that can just look like, hey, I've been just feeling concerned about you lately. How are you doing? Or recently I've noticed some changes or differences in you. I kind of just wanted to check in. Or, you know, you seem kind of down. Do you want to tell me what's going on? Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be a question, I guess. Like you can just send someone a text just to know you're thinking about them. I think particularly with COVID, most people are experiencing more anxiety and depression. And so even if you aren't responded to, I'd be encouraging to not take offense to that, and not to stop checking in. Most often when people are experiencing depression, they're not going to reach out, especially if it's really bad, and they may not respond to you either, but it actually can mean a lot to get that text or to get that voicemail or whatever it is you do to reach out. Here's a term my husband uses a lot: be with, for, and unto their betterment. So yeah, like I think you probably have a good gauge of what they need. So all this means is like be like present with them, whether you can do that physically or if that's through like text or phone, for them. So, you know, whatever those dreams that they have are, whatever they're working towards, whether that's in school and life, just kind of like spur them on and unto their betterment. So if they're looking to do things that are not good and not beneficial, just say it. It's just more important to that. And speaking up in that way, I think can sometimes feel, well, there can be fears, anxiety can set in. You know, what if they take this the wrong way? What if they're offended and they never come back to youth group because I said, oh, I don't know if that's a good idea, you know, to do that thing you're thinking of doing. It might actually lead to this negative consequence. Yeah, maybe they are upset for a bit. But if you're, you know, for them and their growth, it's actually really important to say those things. And you can be strategic in how you say it and careful in your wording, but still good to say it. Yeah, and then, yeah, just like offering that support. So often people feel best supported by a conversation that isn't rushed, isn't filled with questions, and relays empathy for their situation. So you probably know this, and this ties into my next point too. Don't try to fix their problems. Active listening is for sure asking questions, but trying to understand the sentiment of what's being said. So sometimes we err on the side of asking questions, or don't ask enough questions, actually. But if it's just question after question after question, it feels really like an interrogation and doesn't really feel empathetic or like you're trying to understand. But if you're asking questions to understand, it'd be kind of more along the lines of like, when did you begin feeling this way? Did something happen that contributed to like feeling more anxious or depressed? How can I best support you? Have you thought about getting help? All those are great. The other kind of side of that is kind of as you're listening to them, trying to not repeat what they're saying, but summarize. So if I say, yeah, you know, I have a difficult situation at home and my parents are always fighting, and you know, I'm trying to spend time with my younger siblings so they don't hear my parents fighting all the time. The summary of that or reflection of that would be more like kind of being concerned with the emotional side of things. So you could say, oh, like, so looking behind the story, which is, oh man, that sounds like really difficult or frustrating. And sometimes guessing at what the other person is feeling is okay, as long as you leave space for them to correct you if you're wrong. Sometimes it's actually great to keep the conversation going, because then they can say, actually, I'm not frustrated. I'm actually just really angry. Like, okay, you know, what's kind of contributing most to that anger, or who are you angry with? And then maybe, you know, I'm angry with my parents because I shouldn't be the one protecting my sibling from this. They should just get along. Like, okay, you know, tell me more about that. Whereas if we jump in to say, oh, you should talk to your parents and like let them know, you know, how much their fighting is bothering you, or, you know, oh, you should just get out of the house every time that they're fighting, you might be dismissing what they actually want to do or what they're already doing. And it's not that there's no room for problem solving. It's just that sometimes we move too quickly into that instead of actually taking the time to really hear the person. I don't know about you, but if I have a friend who takes time to really hear the sentiment of what I'm saying, sometimes I feel less like I need a solution, because I feel as though someone's on my side. And I think that's the opportunity you have with your teens, is to be their ally, to be someone that they know they can trust. You know, for you to say, oh yeah, man, I have no idea how to even tackle that. What do you do? And you kind of push it back to them. They're going to feel like pretty valued and pretty heard. And now that I'm sure you'll encounter people who want you to solve their problems, but you can also aid them as well by asking them questions and encouraging them to problem solve. Because one of those, again, kind of relating back to that CB tree triangle, is action is sometimes problem solving. And if we learn to do that for ourselves, or we have people who ask good questions, we can actually get better at that. And in turn, kind of influence our anxiety and depression in a different way. Yeah. So of course there's like no easy fix. Our culture is kind of plagued by anxiety and depression. And if you're prone to move along with our culture of right now and quick fix, my suggestions are probably not what you're looking for, because they are hard work. But I think like a good question is, and just to ask in the environment of like working with teens, is how can we cultivate environments fueled by conversation, awareness, and advocacy, while we also begin to care for our own human connections and the connections of others. So the last thing I want to talk about briefly before I give you an opportunity to ask questions is self-care. So as you're supporting teens struggling with mental health, or just teens generally, you can open yourself up to burnout. So what I'm not saying is you can't care for them if you're burnt out. I think you probably still can. You just might not do as great of a job at it, and probably won't enjoy it as much either. So I think these two things can kind of just go hand in hand. You can care for others and care for yourself. Decrease your own risk for anxiety and depression, and help the teens that you're working with do that as well. So the first is kind of ties into one of the other points I was making, but just like speaking up. So yeah, you might be upset with one of the teens, like talk to some of the other leaders about it, not as a means of like gossip, but just to let them know like you feel kind of let down and disappointed. They might be able to offer like another perspective. And you can also let the individual know too, like, hey dude, I've sent you 5 texts, wondering if you're still alive and if, we could catch up. You can display your frustration and disappointment in those ways. It can actually be a helpful reminder for the teen that you're working with that you're also a person, and you're also using your time to reach out to them. Yeah, and it helps the relationship in the long run for them to know, like, you're not just there for them. And if you do start to feel resentful because the youth you're working with are not showing up, not responding, or complaining about the support you're giving to them, or I guess not responding to your text and then complaining that you're not texting them or reaching out to them, it is good to talk about it and just communicate with sensitivity what's taking place. Yeah, and then setting boundaries, making sure that you have balance in your life, that you're considering that psycho-social, spiritual model as well. And that you have your own support. Sometimes in working with teens or just working with people just generally, we can experience their trauma as well. And so just keeping on the table the option for you to get help, whether that's a counselor or just a friend or a pastor. And then, yeah, making sure you have a good daily routine. Routine actually really helps kind of ward off depression if we're incorporating good things into our life. And then, yeah, just seeking support for yourself just generally. You're not betraying anyone by turning to others for support. This could involve, other people in your community. And what I mean with this is, like, if you're having trouble supporting all the youth you're working with, like, bring someone else in to the conversation, or maybe the specific youth you're working with all have mental health struggles, and someone else on your team isn't really experiencing that with their youth, and maybe you can kind of just chat with them and work that out to get that additional support. Yeah, and then, I think sometimes people ask, how do I know when to encourage counseling? I think anytime, not every time you feel out of your element, but if you're starting to question, I think there's might be underlying trauma, or there's a lot going on for this individual. It just could be a good sign that counseling could be a good option. Or if you're noticing their mental health just continuing to decline. And then the other one being, obviously, if there's a lot of suicidal ideation or plans in that regard, the big one. Yeah, but I think the biggest thing is just being open and with the teens, normalizing their experience, trying to check in to see that they're not isolated. And if there is a risk of anxiety and depression, just normalizing in the sense of saying, lots of people experience this, especially now, I've experienced this in some regard, just because otherwise people feel even more alienated in expressing those concerns. So you'll notice some resources at the bottom. I won't really explain them. You can take a look at them if you're interested. Some of them are helpline numbers. Some of them are just resources with further information. Yeah, but I'd love to answer any questions if any of you have any.
I have a question. So you already touched on this a little bit, but I would say like from our girls, they're in grade 11. So the majority of their anxiety, the ones that have said they have anxiety, is stemmed from their relationship with their parents. So whether that's like their parents are super harsh on them with their grades, or maybe their mom is like name calling them about their appearance, or just things like that. How would you say, like in that situation specifically, like how would you say would be the best to help them? Like, I know you were saying just making them feel heard, but like, would there be anything else that you would suggest?
Yeah, I can see the challenge with that in particular. Because I think even if you were to want to problem solve, what's the solution?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've done before that has been helpful is like kind of been a mediator for teens with their parents. But I mean, I wouldn't suggest taking on that role for yourself. It could be an option for counseling. Yeah, and the other just, I'm not saying this is the case, but sometimes, because of that tension, teens or just people generally can hear more than what's being said. So for sure, like, I don't doubt that there's like harshness and potentially like, those things going on. But even just, kind of just chatting through, like, I don't know, kind of just this idea of, okay, you can't control your parents or how they respond to you. But what's the best way for you to respond to not actually spiral the conversation? You actually have the opportunity to diffuse the conversation by your response. And so maybe just chatting a little bit about communication techniques. And then again, I don't know how receptive those particular parents would be to hearing about their youth's needs, but sometimes there is like misunderstanding. I think, encouraging communication, and yes, definitely working hard to hear them. But then even saying sometimes like, I really don't know what you can do. Do you have kind of fielding it back to them? Do you have any ideas? Or sometimes there's a good conversation around values, like what's your parent valuing that maybe you don't share? Like they're placing this large emphasis on grades. Why do you think that is? And sometimes kind of drawing that out can lead to less conflict for the teen, because they start to see what their parent cares about and can just like respect that, even if it's not the same thing that they care about.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful, actually. So
okay, good.
I have a quick question too. I mean, not to generalize, and that's not my intent, but I wonder if maybe this is more of a problem for guys, particularly at the age of like puberty, or like just, like teenage kids, or at any age really. But what would you say, or like, do you have any practical tips for someone? So like it's gotten to the point where you think, okay, they need counseling. Not that this is like happening, but just hypothetically. Like, how would you help them overcome like the kind of stigma around like getting help? Because I know like for a lot of guys, that's something, or anybody really, like there's kind of a stigma around that. Like, oh, like I'm okay, I don't want to do anything. So I don't know if you have any practical.
Yeah, I mean, the first one that comes to mind, which like, you may or may not like, is have your own counseling experience so you can refer to it. I think you actually like, you have this relationship with them that if you were to say like, actually, I'm going to counseling right now, and this is how it's been for me, you have that potential to in some ways bring down that stigma. The other thing I would just chat about kind of the whys, like what is the stigma? what is the fear in going to counseling. I think there's probably like, yeah, is there this idea of weakness in like asking for help, and how could that be like a disadvantage? You know, like you could take it to the extreme. Like, okay, so if you never ask for help, and you're like faced with this difficult situation, what happens? So this would be a way to actually catastrophize cognitive distortion to the point that it actually encourages the person to really look at what they're avoiding in going to counseling.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Brianna, for sharing all this good information. I just have a question. And when it comes to like, say, like practices that someone could just start trying to incorporate by themselves, whether that's for us as leaders or students, or just everyday practices that I guess you would recommend to someone if they came to you with some anxiety.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so usually I start with kind of going back to basic needs and routine. So sleeping, eating. I'll often actually encourage people who have anxiety to decrease their caffeine intake right away. It's not that that's a cause, but anytime you're in a season where there's the potential for more anxiety or stress, it's actually a really good thing to do. And I actually practice it myself. Try not to be hypocritical. Yeah, sleep. In terms of routine, like making sure you have fun, making sure you have a community to connect with, kind of cultivating hobbies and other interests outside of work and school. And then beyond that, I think it's just a great, whether you read a little bit about it or, yeah, probably that's like the best thing to do. Reading more about cognitive distortions. That's actually been helpful for my own levels of anxiety, to be aware of which traps I fall into. So mine is personalization. So personalization is when you assume that if someone's mad, it has to do with you. And so this increases in stress. So your cognitive distortions get worse in moments of stress. So it's really helpful for me to know that, because if I'm having a real stressful day and I think the world is mad at me, it's a good reminder to say, hey, you're really stressed and you didn't get a lot of sleep. And your tendency is to personalize. So that's probably what you're doing right now. And it's okay, but don't put a lot of, credence to these ideas. So I'd be encouraging, to read up on those, because it's really helpful to diminish your own anxiety and just to be aware of it.
Okay, thank you. And I guess just like a bit of a follow-up for like, even like for personal, as like building a community and with anxiety, would you recommend having at least like one or two or a couple of close friends that you like actually do life together with and check up on? I know that that's probably a pretty general question or an answer that's pretty easy with it. We were created for community, so it probably is good, but what would be your personal recommendations?
Yeah, like, not going at it alone. So for sure, like having your close people that you trust to confide in ends up being like really important and valuable.
And then I'm just thinking, and then with you saying that COVID is a time of a lot more anxiety, and like depression, obviously, like we're definitely living in a world where it's more common. And what are like I guess the most common symptoms that you see? And then I guess like kind of an add on to that is when you gave that list there, you said obviously all of us at times can display some of these symptoms. Like by themselves, how many in concert or together would be concerning for you, like the bit more minor ones?
Sure. Yeah, so probably, I definitely pay more attention to suicidal ideation just because of that kind of serious nature of it. If you're interested, because you could do this with your youth, if they mention it, I do what's called a safety plan. So I walk them through the steps. Because it's kind of just like due diligence to make sure that they can keep themselves safe and they have the resources and numbers to call if they get to a point where they can't. It just helps me rest easy at night knowing that they have that resource. So that one for sure. And then I think if there's like probably just 3 or 4 of the other ones that are taking place, probably a combination of the physical and kind of the mental. You know, I guess if there's like a lot of sleep problems, trouble focusing, and like just not very much hope, I'd say, okay, like this, you know, this individual could probably use help for depression.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it was definitely helpful. Thank you.
I have a question. So if you have someone that's like quite negative, so you know they're maybe complaining is not the right word, venting, I guess, about all things in their life, like school's so hard and my family's so annoying and my friends are annoying and like COVID sucks, and like it's very much a like negative conversation. How would you manage that conversation from obviously you want to listen and acknowledge like, hey, a lot of that stuff sucks. I agree. Maybe not I agree, but like I'm hearing a lot of that stuff sucks. That's hard, blah blah blah. But then like how do you acknowledge it and appreciate the emotions behind it, but also try and bring people into a place of like having a better outlook on it, or maybe bring them to a place of like better coping strategies, I guess. Maybe they don't have great coping strategies if everything in their life seems quite negative. Yeah, I guess what would be your like suggestions on how to handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like if it's like more rare and they're just like negative one day, it'd be different, of course, and I'm sure more easy to empathize with it. But I imagine, yeah, like your own frustration of hearing kind of negative after negative after negative. And I think after, you know, isn't bad. I think sometimes kind of just responding with, man, what's going right in your life? And it's kind of like, you know, kind of targeting it back to like, you're noticing all this negative. And sometimes it's actually not always important to say how we're experiencing this individual, but pay attention to your response. Like if you're feeling really irritated listening to them, chances are other people in their life probably are too. And maybe they're responding out of that. Maybe they aren't. Or maybe it's actually like they might be feeling you're feeling. Like they might be feeling really irritated, feeling as though like nothing's going right. So I like to say like, yeah, just be aware of what that person contributes to how you feel. And then, yeah, I mean, for sure, like I hear what you're saying, like it's really good, like acknowledging the frustration and emotion. But sometimes we actually wrongly empathize. So if we're empathizing with every concern that, you know, someone brings up, we're telling them that all those things are huge. You know, oh, you know, you're annoyed by your family. That's a massive big deal. Like, okay, well, not always though. So sometimes I think not responding to every specific concern is okay. Listen, let them vent. And you can say something like, oh, like those are all, like you said, those are all awful things, or those all sound frustrating and like they're building up. But then maybe even try to like come back to their feelings, you know, what action they're taking. Like you can kind of factor in those other sides of things. If someone's just focusing on all their thoughts, what are they missing in terms of like action? Or what are they missing in terms of what they're actually feeling inside? So maybe they're complaining about all these things because they're feeling a lot of anxiety. And so they think if they can fixate on all the bad things that are going wrong, they don't have to connect with their internal sense of anxiety. And it's actually a coping strategy, not a good one, but a coping strategy to dispel that. So yeah, kind of trying to focus on the other side of the triangle that are being missed. Asking questions not specifically about the scenarios. Like I guess you could be like, oh, what specifically is annoying you about your parents. And I think that's probably beside the point in this situation. It would be more about like, what is going right, or is there anything, like how are you experiencing that with sleep, or how's that coming out in these other areas of your life, to try to shift the conversation to kind of a larger narrative.
That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have one more question. Sorry.
No, please.
So my last question is, like, we're youth leaders, and so like naturally whenever my student or our student say something that they're struggling with, like I want to bring in the spiritual aspect and like try to encourage them, whether that's about like praying for them or trying to give them some spiritual advice as well. But like I know a lot of times too, as Christians, if we don't know what to say, it's so easy just to kind of throw like cliche things like, like God's got a plan, or like he's going to work all things together for good. And like I've heard that some of those things are not helpful. They can actually be harmful. But what would you say like would be some good things to help, like to bring in the spiritual aspects? And then what would be some like don'ts to just, like things not to say if someone's experiencing anxiety?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's actually better to say like, yeah, man, I don't know what to say. It's way more authentic. It's way more vulnerable. And they're actually going to trust you a lot more. Now, like for sure, like I get it. Like you probably have moments where they're asking, like, what does the Bible say about this? Or, what should they do as a Christian or something? And I think the positive in that is that God can offer a lot of hope when people are feeling hopeless. And so I hear what you're saying. Like sometimes those things can come across as dismissive. It's not dismissive if you fully hear someone out though. So that would be like that showing of concern, not having a timeline for the conversation. And if you are on a timeline, because I imagine you are sometimes, in my experience with teens, sometimes they bring things up very last minute when it's the end of the night and you actually have to go home. So that's an opportunity to say, hey, you know what? I think this actually is probably a larger conversation. Do you think we could, have our own Skype date or go for coffee and chat more about this? Because I think what you're asking is really important. And if I were to try to come up with an answer right now, it wouldn't actually be honoring to what you're asking. And again, that has the potential to make them feel really heard. Cliches that aren't helpful, I would say like avoid using God's got a plan when it comes to grief or loss. Because even though that's true, it's not going to feel like that in that moment. And it can end up being like really dismissive and hurtful. But to use it as hope, like, hey, everything sucks now, but I'm trusting that there's something better to come. That's okay. That's good. Or like, these things are hard right now and I want to walk with you through it. But I also want to say, like, I think there will be good things ahead or better things ahead. Or, I think, because God's got a plan can sometimes sound like God wants the negative things to happen or has orchestrated those negative things to take place. And that's also unhelpful. So I think if anytime you think of one of those phrases and you're unsure if it's appropriate, try to phrase it in a different way. Like, what's the sentiment of what you're saying? I think is a great question to ask ourselves. It's like, okay, if I'm just trying to relay hope, why can't I just say, I think there's probably hope coming out of this at some point. Because otherwise people, especially in loss and grief and difficult things, want someone to blame. So if you say God has a plan, that might actually encourage the blame to fall to God. Because if God has a plan and everything's rough and difficult, I think that would lead someone to believe that kind of God sucks and wants negative things for us.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Brianna, thank you for I see like in the sheet you sent us, there's a bunch of resources or quite a few resources. Would there be I guess a preference, not, or I shouldn't say preference, but like the order or something you'd recommend in our position as youth leaders? Like what would be the first one to approach or the first thing to do?
Sure. Yeah, so I think first step would be like mental health helpline or like the virtual mental health. You can check that, the first link. It kind of gives you some options. I think it will walk you through a little bit of that as well. But yeah, start with like suggest counseling. If they're not up for counseling, let them know that there's like these helplines they can call. And if they want to, for some of it, I think they can remain anonymous. And then the distress center would be more like, yeah, it's more crisis line. So even when I'm chatting with people about suicidal ideation, it's kind of the step of like, okay, try to soothe yourself, reach out to your support people. If that doesn't get to a place of like safety, then call the distress center. So it's kind of like step 4 in terms of like reach out to your people, try to do something helpful. Here's the distress center. And yeah, I mean, I also encourage you to, yeah, even just like click on those links and see what each of those sites even suggests in terms of what to send towards them. If it would be helpful. Yeah, I mean, I can also just and kind of write a step-by-step kind of approach to some things too.
Yeah, I think I would appreciate that, just or at least having that as a resource that we already have to supplement or whatever we go look at with those links. But I think taking a look at those links would be good. So thank you very much. That was
Yeah,
very
you're welcome.
helpful.
Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah. I have one last question. Do you have, so maybe after a hard conversation with a teen or yeah, hard meeting with them, do you have any suggestions or like what would be your, well, maybe not your personal practice, but suggestions or your personal practice for how to kind of release some of that and to help us like not carry that burden afterwards? Yeah, just like practical ways to do that.
Yeah, so I think your own anxiety can set in those situations. Did I do enough? Was I helpful? Is this person going to be okay? Sometimes if I'm a little concerned at the end of a conversation, I'll say like, are you going to be okay? Are you able to kind of continue processing this on your own? Because even to use that to combat your own anxiety, like later on as you leave, to remind yourself, like they said they were going to be okay. So I have to trust that they were being honest with me. And I can still follow up tomorrow. But for now, what are like my self-care practices? So, yeah, mine is sometimes just like venting out loud on my drive home, because with confidentiality, I can't actually like share a bunch of information. But you guys might have the benefit of like confiding in each other. I think debriefs can be really helpful. Like, hey, just had this really long conversation with the youth and I'm not really sure what to do with it. You free for a quick call? I think when I've worked in organizations where that's been an option, that's been really helpful. I mean, I do have a supervisor if I get to that point for sure. And then, yeah, I mean, just making sure you attend to your own needs. Like, how do you be kind to yourself if it's been like an exhausting emotional conversation? Don't place these extra expectations on yourself if you have to cancel something for the evening, and just have some time alone to like reflect and journal or take a bath. That's my favorite one. Or read a book, turn on the fireplace channel and crochet. These are all my suggestions for me. But it's really important to know what you need to unwind, and to kind of have that as your own, like in your own toolbox. You know, if I have a hard day, here are the 5 things that like really help me. So whether that's actually talking to another person, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's distracting yourself with something helpful, and then responding to your own anxiety of like, okay, no, this was the conversation we had, this is what was helpful, and then trying to dispel that by saying like, if I still have concerns tomorrow, I'll follow up.
That sounds really good. Thank you. I'm going to make my list of 5 things.
Nice.
Vegan ice cream might be on there also.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know that I gained a lot, so thank you. And I'm excited that we recorded it so we can show it for the other people. But thank you for spending the time. I know that it was a topic that a lot of us wanted to hear about, and so I really appreciate you putting together the kind of little information package and answering our questions. So if everyone wants to say thank you to Brianna.
I'm muted.
Thank
Show her some
you.
love.
Thank you, Brianna.
Thanks
Super
so
You're
much.
welcome. Thanks for having me, guys. And if any other questions come up, like Jared and Danielle have my email. And if there's any other resources I can offer, like the safety plan or just kind of a step-by-step approach, I'm really happy to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I was thinking also, you live so close to me. I'm like, I need to come borrow a book sometime.
Yeah, you can definitely
So
do
I'll just
that.
walk on
Access
over.
to my personal library. Yeah.
I know. So lucky. Me and Brianna are like practically ish neighbors, in case you guys are wondering. Just if you don't. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We're going to transition to our little Christmas party. You are welcome to
Okay,
stay.
I'll say goodbye.
Bye, Brianna.
I'd love to stay, but I need to eat supper.
Oh, yeah. That is
Go get
important.
that grub.
Yes.
Thanks,
Okay, bye
Brianna.
guys. Yeah, you're welcome.
Bye. Oh, somebody. Wow. Unmute your mic. Unmute your stuff. Hey, really, really quick, really pop. Was that helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really helpful.
I found that to be very, very helpful. Great idea, Danielle. That was legit. I definitely feel like, when you like get deep in that stuff and you start thinking, you're thinking about your students, you're thinking about people in your lives, and you start thinking about yourself. And I'm like, well, like I feel like I need to like go sit at a big body of water and like process the last 10 years of my life. It's heavy
Yeah,
stuff.
I almost cried like 3 times. I think I need to go for a quick skip and then I'll change my mood.
I was just about to expose you. Danielle texted me like 3 times. I'm gonna cry. I just about cried. She said it once, but
Yeah, one time.
seriously, so good. So there'll be more of those to come in the new year that are specifically strategic to you guys as leaders, to leading students, and even to parents per se. But again, we're on Zoom, and I know it sucks. I don't want to take too much of your time. I just want to leave you with a couple thoughts and then a couple like need to knows. I don't know, or one need to know. I'll have a little gift and a card for each of you. Maybe we can plan like the more like in person. Granted that the restrictions are changed, kind of hangout. We'll definitely be doing more hangouts in the future, considering that. Well, hopefully that the restrictions don't stop us from that. But yeah, thinking we can plan something more so for like a Christmas celebration. But I'll have something for each of you, a little token, a small token in comparison to the gratitude of your guys' leadership over this season. And I just want to say that, like, first and foremost, that I'm so thankful for ones on the call and ones that aren't. Yes, we're still recording, so that's all good. But thank you guys for persevering. Like, this is probably one of the hardest seasons to be a youth leader amongst a lot of you guys being in school and like crazy seasons of life. And I just want to thank you guys for, not throwing in the towel, as even though you had all right to, and the season was yelling in your ear and telling you to, and just tension with students and life, I'm sure. So I just want to honor each and every one of you guys and say thank you for persevering and being steadfast and leading strong. And I feel like this anticipation, I know it's maybe tough to be hopeful and different. I know it has been for me in some sense, but there's a greater divine anticipation that like we will see the fruit of our harvest. Every text, every prayer, even if it was just a thought or whatever it looked like over this season, that God is faithful and his word doesn't return void, and he's faithful to complete every good work he started. So yeah, just to have that at the forefront of your mind, to know that like God's doing something behind the scenes in your life, in and through you, with students in our youth ministry as a whole. So thank you guys so much, amongst, miscommunication and maybe not feeling as supported and all the other things. We can go down the list. I'll have individual chats with all of you, and just we'll bridge the gaps. It's my favorite word, apparently. But I just want to sincerely say thank you guys. And I mean it when I say I love you guys and I pray for you guys. That's not just a thing that I say. I genuinely would take a bullet for each and every one of you. And I'm so thankful for each and every one of you. And I won't get emotional. No. Yeah. Did I mute myself? No. Anyway, so yeah, thanks guys. I think two things, even from that chat, amongst all the content that was so helpful, I think going into this season, if there's two things that, she talked about self-care, which was super clutch. And then that in respect of our lens, as well as just like all these studies and stuff showing that the new domain of like youth ministry is really, or not youth ministry, just youth ministry, but like the next gen, millennials, Gen Z, is mental health. Like that's the domain of ministry. And so it wasn't by coincidence that we had that chat kind of going into this next season, whatever it might look like as we're on break and as we're strategizing and planning for the next 6 months, like just trying to be more proactive and less reactive, and actually strategize to like connect people to Jesus, where it's not like burning out for you guys, but then also students aren't just like, left to be eaten up by the world we're living in and culture and all these things. So trying to be proactive in that sense and doing research. It's like really much, they say that it's the domain of the next gen. So two things, I think if we could be united and unified over praying, specifically over this next, little break and coming into the new year, if we could be unified over like posturing ourselves in a place of prayer, like intentionally, for FA Youth and for the students, and just asking that the Holy Spirit would be so present in every single one of your kids' lives and every single one of their homes and their families, and that we would just really like see the fruit of the Holy Spirit working, because it's scary and it's dark and suicide rates are up and anxiety and depression is up, and like all this like crazy stuff that's in front of us, you know what I mean? And again, I love the question you asked, Charles. It's like so much of church can be like, hey, it's gonna be okay, God's got a plan, revival's coming, not that those are bad things, like there's truth in them, but like how do we actually like see the tangible power of the Holy Spirit move, like actually, you know what I'm saying? So if we could be unified over that, man, if I could call out of desperation for anything, that we could just constantly pursue, like, let's not get apathetic in this break or whatever. Not that I think that's any of you guys, but I just know that's very much it's in the wind. I've struggled with it, and just like, just feeling like, like kind of hopeless. So if we could be unified over that, like constantly pursuing the Lord and praying, for the students, for the youth ministry, and praying for one another, just praying that God would move in and through each of our lives. Like if you want a list from me, or if you need to go in the group chat, like just take 5 minutes and just lift up each name to the Lord. I think there's so much power in that. And I just want to be, if anything, if we could just be a youth ministry that prays. Like if we go down in shambles, at least we'll go down praying. But I rebuke that. That's not going to happen. But yeah, that's just my ask and my heart, that we could pray in this season for each other, for the kids, and just say, that God would move. And then, I had another thought. It left, but it must not have been that important. And just, going into the new year again, like me, Danielle, Jess, and some other people. I mean, you guys know, some of you might know, but Seb's going to be coming on staff. Sebastian Martinez, if you didn't know, and helping out with youth, which is going to be lit. So exciting. But that aside, just like in strategizing and lots of chats, wanting this to be an experience that's not going to cause you guys to burn out is important to me. And it might not seem like it, but it very much is. And so it's something that we're putting at high value. And trying to figure out how to, bridge the gap in those areas for you guys as you lead students and just as we continue to move forward and strategize and do youth ministry as a whole. So, going to the new year, there's one thing that I want you guys to just maybe think about, of where you can ultimately I want you guys, whatever feedback and thoughts and ideas you have, direct line to me, Danielle, Jock. Obviously with our calls, we've been talking with some of those things, the girls have had some chats, the guys, we had one chat and we're going to have more. We can talk about some of different ideas and stuff like that. And that's great. But also just for you guys to know, anything that you're thinking, praying about, seeing, feel free to text it to me or call me. And even if it's a criticism, don't be shy, 100%, just shoot it, whatever. I don't know how to encourage you to do that, but I really want you to know it's valued and it's important to me. But something we're thinking about doing was introducing a thing called virtual rooms, where we would just have a ton of online present stuff, but in shorter doses, and switching a little bit of and I'll talk more about this when we have an official meeting in the new year, as we start youth again. But switching a little bit of the model in the sense of having connect weeks incorporated in. So connect weeks would look instead of meeting every week on a Zoom or in person or something like that, 1 week would be reserved to just divide and conquer between either if there's 2 leaders in a group or if there's one, just taking 5 minutes and setting a time where you can intentionally call each one of your students. And some of the stuff even Brianna said was really helpful to that. And just we won't meet physically, but just having intentional conversation. So scheduling it. If there's 6 kids in your group, or if there's 12 kids in your group, Adania and Jaya, you guys would just divide and conquer. I'll take these 6, you take these 6. And this week we're just going to call them and have a 10-minute combo. If it turns into half an hour or an hour, sick. But just going through a few things of hey, here's what's happening this week. Here's what we're doing. And just how are you? How can I be there for you? And we'll strategically resource you in the sense of helping how those conversations can go. Something like that to take away from just being on Zoom, because if this is the trajectory and we have to do more of this, then it's just sucks. And so trying to shift things, and then having a platform of virtual rooms where hey, for 15 minutes, we're gonna hop on Twitch, and whoever wants to go on Twitch and watch JM play 1 round of Warzone or play with him can do so. And JM's just whatever, crushing it. Or we're doing, a 15-minute Insta live with Kaylee and Rochelle, and they're talking about a certain hot topic, but they're also baking cookies. Or giving prophetic words or something like that. I don't know. We have a bunch of different ideas, or having a bunch of seminars that are specific to just leaders, specific to parent. Well, none of them are specific just to leaders, but some of them are I put PSL beside them. So it'd be parents, students, and leaders, and stuff like gender fluidity, or fluidity. I said that wrong. You know what I'm saying? Or homosexuality, or just different hot topics. And they're going to be specifically set up where it's a 15 or 18-minute combo. Just pop in. You could be on your lunch break, and having different things like that we can all gather around and take part in. And it's not just so much of hey, how's your guys' week going? You guys doing good? You guys want to watch this sermon? And I'm not saying that's been all your groups, but I'm sure that's been some of it, because I've popped in some, and it's yeah, it's just tough or whatever. So having different things like that as an online presence, and then shifting it where there's a connect week where it's hey, we're just going to call, even if we're meeting in person, setting it up where it's there's a week off in a sense of meeting in person, but it's just intentional to build that relationship. And so these are just some things I'm putting out there for you guys right now, just to get a little bit of a grasp. And my hope is that you could pray strategically into some of them, and maybe just ask the Lord, looking at your capacity over I don't know, really rest these next couple of weeks. And just, I'm praying that the Lord gives you a supernatural rest, but praying to take inward what's your capacity, and see maybe some of these things that you could hone in on and own. If Kaylee's ooh, the whole IG live, once every 2 weeks, I could come up with stuff every 2 weeks, and we could do me and Rochelle could do this, or we could do this, or whatever, or anything along those lines, or all these different areas that you think maybe you could yeah, that you might want to own. I'm just looking to make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, like different, like hosting Warzone game, or sorry, not Warzone, like what's that game? Among Us, and some of the topics, seminar topics. They're like, some of them are intense, like racial equality, gender equality, finding purpose, self-harm, suicide. And those will be like different people coming to speak on those things. And even you can invite your friends. Like, we just want to make it like a place where it can be like resourceful to you guys, to students, but also to anybody else. And like some of the lives, like I'm gonna probably hop on and do like story time with Jer and do like different things like that. Well, I don't know. That's kind of weird, honestly. As I said that, that's the first time I said it out loud and didn't like read it. It just felt weird. Anyways, just like this, am I making sense right now?
Yeah.
So yeah, just sit with it, think about it, and I'd love to hear from all of you about some things that maybe you'd love to be a part of or hone in as far as like virtual rooms. And if you have any questions about like, you know, the shift in like Connect weeks, we're also going to have like a kind of a 4/5 week rotation of like what each week of like house parties will be. So like some of them will be like event nights. So it's like, you're not going through a discussion guide, you're not looking at a sermon, you're literally just like doing something fun where you're like, if it's on Zoom, which Holy Spirit, please no. But if it is like, hey, you're maybe watching a movie on the, what's that thing that's like not Next Party, but it's something else?
Scener.
Yeah, like something like that. And we're setting you guys up for success in the sense of like, hey, it's event night, here are like 15 ideas that you guys could do. So you're not scrambling last minute and stuff like that. And then the simple gathering will be more so the house party thing where it's like the content from Sunday / a 5-minute like update / here's what we're talking through as a youth ministry and going through and spiritual practices. So that's kind of like all the different things we're going to be doing, but I'll give more of a detailed picture of like each moving part when we have our meeting in the new year. But again, I just want you guys to pray about it and see what the Lord would have you like own as leaders, and any other feedback or ideas that you might have. Like, we're building culture and shifting culture together. It's not just me, and very much like that's why I have Danielle and Jock and like some of the other people like helping so much, because if it's just me, we're gonna fail. But if we do it together, then I think there's hope and there's success. So I just wanted to leave you guys with that. Think about it, pray about it. I look forward to hearing from each of you, and Merry Christmas. Any thoughts?
I have something. I was just wondering about elements.
Yeah.
Is that like a
So-
thing or no?
That's not happening. I forgot. That was one of the things I missed. Yeah, that is not happening as far as a district. They just haven't said anything, or I don't think they're doing anything. And it's kind of hard for us to like replicate elements in this season. Like, it's even with all the restrictions and stuff, like us going to like a retreat center or something like that, it just like doesn't really work. So and if we did try doing something like that on Zoom, I quite literally think I'd snap my neck. So yeah, we're not gonna do that.
Okay.
So, but yeah, we'll have like sorry, I just remembered. There's also some calendar shifts coming into the new year that I'll send out to you guys this next week, just so you have, and then we'll do a call on the 8th, which I'll get to you this week, which will be like kind of our intro. 8th? Sorry, I think it might be the 9th or the 8th. It's off the top of my head. I'll send that all to you so you have it. Where that would be like our little meeting. It won't be more than an hour. My guess is we'll probably have to do it on Zoom, but if we're not, sweet. But yeah, that'll just be our kind of intro back into youth and like what things will look like, more detailed, and yeah, if that makes sense. Word. Well, I'm sorry that this is our Christmas party. But honestly, it's better to wrap it up and not just prolong the pain on Zoom. But I love you all, praying for you all. And like I said, like I'll follow up with each of you individually and chat through things. And then I also have a little gifty gift for all of you. Probably going to drop them all off at your houses maybe me and Danielle will. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. We'll figure it out. But we'll get them to you. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Comments, concerns
Good.
right now before I pray and we say sayonara. Look at that, 8:29. Let's go. Oh, somebody. I said 8:30. No comments, concerns? Should we just pray? Sick. Chelsea, do you want to pray for us?
Why did I know you're going to say that?
Holy Ghost.
Yeah, I can pray. Dear God, I just thank you. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. Dear God, I just thank you for being able to gather here, whether it's on Zoom. And I just pray for every one of us leaders right now, and that just during this time of rest, that you just refill us and recharge us, God, and that we'd be able to get closer to you and have peace, and that we just feel rested in your presence, God, and what you're doing in this season, even when it feels out of control, it feels like, as Jared was saying, just mundane or just feeling apathetic and all those things. But yeah, I pray that you just give us vision and refresh us, God, and that that you would just pour out your love onto all of us, and that we'd feel your love. And so I also just pray for all of our students, and that you teach us how to be there for them, and that you teach us how to serve them the best that we can. And that you would just remind us that we can rely on your strength, God, and just continue to give us a hunger and thirst for you, and that be a model for our students as well. And that you'd also bless Jer and Danielle and Ja and Jess and all of them too, God, and that you just give them favor for all the hard work that they've been doing. And that we just all have a great rest of our night, and we thank you. Amen.
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 Amen. Amen. Amen. Amen. Amen. Amen. Well, love you all so much. And I'll be in touch. We'll be in touch. Sick. We'll catch you guys on Sunday if you're there. Or whatever. Anyways, I'm going to start talking again if we don't end this. Okay, love you guys. Das Vidania.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.